Bitcoin is sitting at $67,035. And quietly, underneath all the noise, the Iran strikes, the shift tweets, the ETF outflow headlines, three completely separate signals are starting to converge on the same conclusion. Long-term holders just accumulated 212,000 Bitcoin in a single month. The CEO of VanEck went on CNBC and said the word bottom, and Bitcoin's developers just moved to address the one risk that, if left unsolved, could theoretically send the price to zero. None of these stories are getting the attention they deserve individually. Put them together, and the picture they form is one of the most interesting things I have seen in this market in months. This is not financial advice, but this is worth your full attention right now. Let's get into it. Signal 1. The people who are never wrong about Bitcoin just made their biggest move in months. There is a group of Bitcoin holders that the market consistently underestimates right up until the moment it's too late. They are called long-term holders, wallets that have held Bitcoin for at least 155 days without selling. These are not traders. These are not people reacting to headlines. They are the people who sat through the 2022 crash, the FTX collapse, the recovery to $126,000, and every gut-wrenching drawdown in between. They have seen this before. They know what this feels like. And in February 2026, while retail investors were panic Googling, "Is Bitcoin dead?" and ETF outflows were dominating the headlines, long-term holders quietly added 212,000 Bitcoin to their wallets. 1 month, 212,000 Bitcoin. That is not a small number. At current prices, that is over $14 billion worth of Bitcoin moved off exchanges and into cold storage by the cohort with the longest track record of being right in this market. Glassnode analyst Chris Beamish put it directly. After months of sustained net selling, long-term holder net position change is now easing, suggesting that selling pressure from seasoned holders is moderating as Bitcoin stabilizes. Read that again. The selling that has been weighing on this market for months, the distribution from long-term holders who bought at lower prices and were taking profits, is slowing down. The tide is turning. And at exactly the same time, the 2-day MACD indicator crossed bullish, with the MACD line moving above the signal line as histograms showed strengthening momentum. Technical analysis is never a guarantee, but when on-chain accumulation and technical momentum start pointing in the same direction simultaneously, that is a data point worth taking seriously. Signal 2. The CEO of VanEck just said the word bottom on CNBC. Jan VanEck is not a Twitter influencer. He is not a retail trader posting price targets for engagement. He is the chief executive of VanEck, one of the most respected asset management firms on the planet, the company that was among the first to launch a U.S. spot Bitcoin ETF and an institution with billions of dollars of exposure to this asset. And on Monday, he went on CNBC and said something that cut through all the noise in about 30 seconds. His argument was this: stop overcomplicating it. Bitcoin is governed by two things: a fixed supply of 21 million coins and a 4-year halving cycle. In that cycle, Bitcoin runs hard for 3 years and corrects sharply in the 4th year. 2026 is the 4th year. That is why we are in a bear market. And right now, he said, we are making a bottom. That is a significant statement from a man in that position. VanEck went on to make another observation that I think is being dramatically underreported. He noted that the Iran conflict may actually be accelerating Bitcoin's adoption as a payment rail in the Middle East, pointing to the UAE, Dubai, and the broader region as deeply crypto-friendly, and suggesting that when parties want to move money outside of traditional banking infrastructure in conflict zones, crypto payment rails become not just useful, but essential. That is a use case for Bitcoin that is different from digital gold and different from speculative asset. It is Bitcoin as neutral financial infrastructure in a world where traditional infrastructure cannot be trusted. That narrative has barely begun to be priced in. Signal 3, the one risk that could send Bitcoin to zero just got addressed. This is the one most people in this space are not talking about, and it is arguably the most important development of the three. There is a risk to Bitcoin that has existed in the background for years, one that Bitcoin holders have largely chosen not to think about because it is uncomfortable and it feels distant, but it is real. And this week, Bitcoin's developers took a meaningful step towards solving it. Here is the risk, explained simply. To spend Bitcoin, you create a digital signature, a piece of mathematics that proves you control your private key without revealing it. The security of that system depends on the assumption that it is computationally impossible to reverse engineer someone's private key from their public signature. Today, that assumption holds. Classical computers cannot crack it, but quantum computers, which operate on fundamentally different principles, theoretically could. Not today, not even close to today, but within the next decade, the underlying technology is advancing fast enough that the question is no longer whether quantum computers will eventually be powerful enough, it is when. If a quantum computer ever became capable of fabricating Bitcoin signatures, it would represent an existential threat. The price would not just fall, it would potentially collapse towards zero as the entire security model of the network came into question. That is the risk. And as of February 2026, a new Bitcoin improvement proposal, BIP 360, has entered formal consideration for the first time. It is not a solution yet. It will be edited, debated, and refined for years before anything is implemented. But its formal entry into the development pipeline matters for one critical reason. Bitcoin's developer community has now officially started the process of addressing quantum risk head-on, rather than leaving it as the uncomfortable thing nobody talks about. The Motley Fool's analysis framed this correctly. BIP 360 is progress, not a cure. It won't make Bitcoin quantum secure overnight. What it does is begin the conversation at the protocol level, start the clock on a process that, if completed, removes one of the last remaining existential risks to Bitcoin's long-term survival. And importantly, for people holding Bitcoin through ETFs, the asset issuer will handle security upgrades on their behalf as they are rolled out. The friction for ETF holders is essentially zero. What these three signals mean together. Let me put this together for you because individually these stories each carry weight. Together, they tell a specific story about where Bitcoin is right now. Long-term holders, the cohort with the best track record in this market, just accumulated 212,000 Bitcoin in 1 month, their largest accumulation since the Q4 2025 distribution phase. Selling pressure from the most informed holders is moderating. One of the most credible voices in institutional asset management went on national television and said the word bottom. And the one risk that has always hung over Bitcoin's long-term future, the quantum computing threat, just got formally entered into the development process for the first time. None of this means the bottom is definitively in. VanEck said we are making a bottom. Present tense, an ongoing process, not a single moment. Markets do not flip on a single day. Bottoms are built over weeks and months, and the process is rarely comfortable while it is happening. The Iran conflict is still unresolved. ETF flows are still recovering. The macro environment is still uncertain in ways that can move Bitcoin sharply in either direction on short notice. All of that remains true, but the data right now, across on-chain behavior, institutional sentiment, technical momentum, and long-term protocol development, is building a case that the worst of this cycle may be behind us rather than ahead of us. The people who act on that thesis before it becomes consensus are the ones who historically look back without regret. The people who wait for certainty are the ones who consistently pay the highest price for it. Drop a comment right now. Do you think the bottom is in, or do you think we see one more flush before the turn? I want to know where this community actually stands today. Subscribe if you want to track these signals as they develop. Because if these three converging data points are right, the next few months in Bitcoin are going to be very different from the last 5. See you in the next one.